In the next video, we're going to talk about setting up some database connections, and one of the things that I tell you in there is that you can make this string name whatever you want. It actually needs to be local SQL server. So I'm going to show you this little bit before that video. When you watch that video, just remember wherever it says SQL server, it has to be local SQL server. So it's going to have to match here, and it's going to have to also be local SQL server down in this section. So we'll go through this, and the reason I do this is I just tested with somebody's website, and it didn't work, kept throwing errors when I had an SQL server. But as soon as I changed to local SQL server, everything works. So this name is something special. You've got to use this name. So just remember that when you're watching the next video. Hey there, this is part 3 of our video on how to set up things at GoDaddy if you're going to run a production server there. So in this, well, in the previous two, we created an SQL database, and then in the last one we modified our web config to use that database. In this one, we're going to go into the database itself and show you how to, if you want to add files or create things. And the one thing I'm going to do here is create some roles, because we can always create users just by making the use the create user wizard, but we can't create, well, we can't easily create roles. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of this. So just like before, you log into your account, go to the web control page, and then go to the database page. And once you're here, click on this Manage via Web Admin, and it's going to ask you to log in now. So now, rather than talking to the web server control, we're talking to the database. We're talking directly to the database. So this is where you need to log in with, when you created your database, you gave it a username and password. So I'm going to type some stuff in here and then come back and gray this out. Okay, after you click connect, you'll see this. And what you can see here then is we can view our tables, the tables in our database. And these ones, we haven't made these, but they're just here. And the reason they're here is we said install that ASP.NET schema, and these are all the tables that are created, and they all have fields in them, all to handle the membership stuff. So the next step, again, in creating roles is we're going to actually come down here and just run this query analyzer. And what this does is allow us to run direct queries right to the database. And so to create roles, what we can do is, again, it's in this same Word document. Is we're going to do this. We're going to say this, just create role. And I'm going to come over here to this thing and type or just paste this in here. The role I'm going to create, though, I don't want to call this admin. In fact, I don't remember what I called my role. So let me go back here real quickly, and I'm going to check the web config in one of these files, in the admin file, because I think I got both the role names here. I think I had, employee and manager or something like that. Yeah, employees and manager. So the roles that you want, the roles that you created on your test server, in that ASP.NET MDB, whatever it is, test file. We need to recreate those. So once I just change that role that I want to create, I just do execute here, and it comes back and says executed successfully. So I make one for employees and one for manager. And this is where it really helps if you know SQL. You can talk directly to the database, and you could recreate all your tables. You can do whatever you want. You can actually import things, which I'm not that good with, so I'm just going to kind of do things this way. So again, we click execute, and it says script executed successfully. So now we've got the two roles in there. Then the last thing I want to do is add at least one user to the role so that I can get into my sadmin folder. And I'm sorry, the main one is my manager. I want to be able to add users here. So again, if we scroll down here a little bit, I've got the SQL query made for you. So we're going to execute this command, and we're going to change a couple things. And one thing to look at here, we have to put a date in, and the date is month slash date, 2 digits for month slash 2 digits for date, 4 digits for the year. So we'll come back here to that window where we're talking right to the database, and I'm going to paste this in here, and I'm going to say add the user to the role. The username I'm going to put in here, I'm going to put in Tony, and I'll get rid of him later. And the role name, I want to be manager, so I can create other users. And the date, I'm going to make this 08/05/2011. Okay, so this is kind of small in here, but there's quotes and things like that. But if you copy and paste this, everything will work out okay. Just got to change those 3 fields. So I'll say execute this. It says script executed successfully. So that's it. So again, we should be able now to log in as Tony, and he should be able to be a manager and go into all the other stuff that we wanted to do. So again, that's the steps for doing this. Open up that database script manager so we can get in there and talk directly to the database. And then if you're not an expert at SQL, grab this Word document, create your roles, and then make sure to add at least one user to your whatever your admin role, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so that's it for this video. And I think that's pretty much it for setting up the database. Oh, another thing I want to show you is how to use FTP to move your files up. Hi, welcome back. This is our second video in setting up a production web server, and I'm doing this at GoDaddy. I think this will be real similar to other web hosting sites. And this is a little complicated, so let me tell you this. Well, let me just review first. In our first video, which I'll try to remember to put a link on this one back to, we showed you excuse me, how to set up your SQL server at GoDaddy once you have your GoDaddy account. So I'm assuming that SQL server's been set up, and that you put in when you set it up, that you put in the ASP schema, and that way it allows you to do the membership. So in this step, what we're going to do is configure our website via our web config to use that SQL server, and then we're also going to configure it to say, hey, for our membership stuff, let's use that SQL server, and then we'll also put some sections in here to generate the encryption keys for our passwords. So this is a little complicated. Let me say this from the start too. I have a Word document, and I'm going to work off of this. That kind of shows you step by step on how to set up the database if you miss that first step, and then how to set up the database connection, the things we're doing now. And anyway, so it's several steps, and sometimes I find it easier to work off this Word document than following a video. And the nice thing about the video is, I guess, you can watch it over and over again. But I'll put this Word document out on my website, and you can grab a copy of this too if you need it. Okay, so let's just get started. The first step, the first thing we want to do is make a copy of your web config. And the reason for this is, when we're doing our testing on our local machine, we want to use this ASP.NET-DB.MDF file. But once we go out into production, we're not going to use that file anymore to hold our membership stuff. You can use our desktop database anymore. We're going to use the production web server, SQL server at GoDaddy. So when I want to test, I have to have one web config that points to this file. But when I'm in production, again, I want to point at my GoDaddy SQL server and use it for the membership. So what I do is I kind of develop my website, and then when I'm ready to go start testing the production server, I make a copy of the web config. And I'm going to have one called webconfig.local and one webconfig production. I can only have one of those be my actual web config at any time. So I'll use the production one. That's when I'll have to be up to GoDaddy. But whenever I do any testing here, I'll rename this local one to be webconfig and use it. But for now, I'm going to call this one webconfig, but this will end up being my production one. Okay, so I rename, or I make a copy. And so this gets a little hard. as you're working along now, you got to kind of maintain 2 copies of your web config. Okay, my next step, after I've created my production web config, is I come in here and we make sure our authentication type is set. And in this, we can set some other parameters. So I'm going to copy this from the Word document. And if you want to see what all these parameters do, this document has a link, or you can just go to MSDN and search for web config, and it'll tell you all about all these other parameters. But I'm going to paste this in here. Right now, my authentication mode, you notice it's kind of the standalone. Well, I'm sorry, it's in the web config in the system.web section. And it's a standalone tag. I'm going to paste this other one in, which is no longer standalone. It has this form section inside of it. And the form name, I don't think this has to match anything. I could be wrong. I should go read the documentation, but I'm going to call it runner sole. And then it's got this other stuff. But the main thing in here, like this login URL, we could change this if we didn't want to use login.aspx as our login page, or if we didn't want to, and this timeout controls how long a user can be inactive before they're automatically timed out. So on this one, I have it set to 30 minutes. Just, I think it's a little more convenient than I think by default it's 5 minutes. If you're inactive for 5 minutes, it logs you out. So anyway, you can read about all these parameters, like I said, out at MSDN. But that's step number 1 for modifying our web config. Step number 2 is we have to set up our database connection. And to do that, we build this configuration section. And again, I'm going to copy this from this Word document and put it up here. And this configuration section actually goes outside of the system.web. It actually contains the system.web. So I'm going to paste this here, but I'm going to get rid of this close string and get rid of this other second start string. So really what I want to do is copy the connection string section. And what this connection string does exactly what it says. It builds up a string that we can use to connect to our SQL server. And to do this, you notice we're going to need some information. We're going to need the name of our SQL server, our database name, our user ID, and our password. And this is for our production SQL server. So most of this stuff we have to get from GoDaddy. Your user ID and password, hopefully you wrote that down in the previous video when you created your SQL database. And your database name and the server name, well, we'll go and get that from GoDaddy. I'll show you how to get that right now. So if you go to GoDaddy, and then, let's just take you here all the way from the start. So assume that you've logged in. Then what you're going to want to do is go to My Account and go to My Products. And then what you want to do is, in My Products, got to log in again, sorry about that. Okay, so you log in, and then we want to go to My Products, and then you want to see your web hosting. And it tries to take you here, but what you really want to see is up here. You want to launch what they call it the control center. It's the control panel. This is where we're going to do most of our work on our website, though. So again, you log into GoDaddy, say My Products, and then launch the control center. And then we can get to our database information in 2 ways. We can either go through here or go through here. They both take you to the same place. If we go to this one and say SQL Server, it'd be the same thing as going down to the database one and saying SQL Server. So it shows you your SQL servers have been set up. And then to see that information, click on the pencil. I'm not going to do it here because there's some information that, it's Scott stuff that, I just don't want the whole world to see. But anyway, click on this pencil, and that will show you everything. I'm sorry, not everything. It will show you the server name and the database name. And then again, your user ID and password, hopefully you remember that from when you set up your SQL server. Okay, so that's step 2, is to build this connection string section so we can actually connect up to the database. Then once that's done, go on to the next step, and we set up our security and membership provider. And this just says, there's a database out there that has all our usernames and passwords and role information. And where is that? And by default, that's pointing at your that ASP.NET DB, whatever it is, MDF file. But we want to now point at this SQL Server file. So again, I'm going to this Word document and copying this information. So we'll copy this and come in here, and this goes inside the system.web section. So I'm going to paste this in here, and inside here the name doesn't really matter, but this connection string, this really matters. This says when we connect to our membership provider, which connection string are we using. This name has to match the name of the connection string you built up here. So if we call it SQL Server here, we have to call it SQL Server here. Our application name, this is something that's used when it generates the encryption keys for the password. So you want to set this to something. I'm just going to call this one runner soul. If you don't set this, it's based on the path of your files wherever they're stored. And so as long as you stay at one web host, everything will be okay. But if you ever move, or if your web host ever moves your files to a different path, all of a sudden all your passwords quit working because the key is different. Well, anyway, so it's just really important that you set this application name. Once you set it, you won't ever have to change it. And then there's some other values here. Again, I'm not going to go through all these. I am just going to change this for Scott to say this require question and answer for password retrieval. I'm going to set this to false. Then there's things for the password length and how many characters and yada yada yada. And then this password format. There's again a couple values here. I'm going to set this to encrypted because we do want to encrypt the passwords. Okay, so that's step 2. We set this up. Make sure this points to our SQL Server if you're copying it from our SQL Server connection string. If you're copying this from the Word document like I have, no big deal. But you do want to change this. You can read about these. But this is the one that you do want to change, this application name. Then the next step is to generate a machine key. And again, this is also used in the encryption. And there's utilities out there on the internet that will generate unique machine keys for you. I'm just going to take this one and copy this one out of here. And this goes, I'm going to put this right after the membership. So it's just this big long key. You probably want to get a unique one. Don't copy this one. Like I said, there's places out there. I got a link in this Word document to one that online that'll create them for you. Okay, and then let's see. I think that's it for setting up the web config. We'll come back and do this other later. Actually, we've already talked about this in the membership things. So that's basically it. We create this file with these 3 things in it. The connection strings, and again, you're going to have to customize 4 items in here to match up with your database stuff at GoDaddy. And then this membership section that goes in system.web, and you're going to have to change the connection string name to match. I'm sorry, you probably won't have to change it. Just make sure it matches the one up there. Change your application name, and then check these other settings, and then generate a machine key. Then we put this in the web config that you'll FTP up to GoDaddy, and then once you have it up there, you can test it out. There's actually, we'll in the next one show you how to kind of set things up, to set up users, because again, all the users that we created on our test stuff here are not in the database. We'll have to either recreate those users. Well, that was what we'll do, is we'll actually recreate those users and roles and things like that. Okay, so the other thing is this Word document. I think it'll help you out. And then the last thing I just want to remind you of is to find out that information from GoDaddy. Log into your account, save, view products, whatever it was. go back and look in the video again, and then go to the control panel, show me the databases, and then in the database thing, you can say, do the pencil thing and see that. So I'm going to actually gray some stuff out here. There's things I didn't want you to see. Okay, so that's the end of this video. I know it's kind of long. Thanks for sticking with us.